In today's video, we're diving into one of the more controversial presidencies in American history, that of Andrew Jackson. Jackson's rise marked a dramatic shift in American politics, from elite dominance to what his supporters saw as the triumph of the common man. But this transformation didn't come without cost. His presidency was full of dramatic clashes over power, the Constitution, the economy, Native American lands, and the very nature of American democracy. Let's get started. On March 9th, 1829, Andrew Jackson was inaugurated as the seventh President of the United States. That day, an estimated 15,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. to witness the event. The excitement was palpable. For many, Jackson wasn't just a president, he was their president. In an unprecedented move, the White House was opened to the public. The celebrations quickly spiraled out of control. Crowds filled the halls, stood on furniture, smashed china, and overwhelmed the staff. Eventually, they had to be lured out with bowls of spiked punch served on the White House lawn. To Jackson's critics, this chaotic scene was proof of mob rule. Supreme Court Justice Joseph Story called it the reign of King Mob. But to others, this was a proud moment of the people, a celebration of democracy's new direction. 8 months later, Jackson addressed Congress with a message outlining the principles of what would become known as Jacksonian Democracy, a bold, populist vision for America. In his first message to Congress, Jackson revealed his core goals: expanded suffrage for all white men, regardless of wealth or property ownership, the relocation of Native Americans west of the Mississippi, the spoils system or patronage, where political supporters were rewarded with government jobs, a commitment to extinguishing the national debt, and the elimination of the Bank of the United States, which Jackson viewed as a corrupt, privileged institution. This vision aligned with a dramatic political realignment happening across the country. The era of good feelings, characterized by one party dominance under James Monroe, was over. In its place emerged a new two party system during Jackson's presidency. Jackson's supporters became known as Democrats, modeled after Jefferson's old Republican Party. They favored local control, limited government, equal opportunity for all white men, free trade, opposition to monopolies, high tariffs, and high land prices. Democrats drew their base from the South, the West, from urban workers and immigrants. On the other side were the Whigs, led by Henry Clay. They resembled the defunct Federalist Party and supported a national bank, federal funding for infrastructure, and a protective tariff. Whig support was strongest in New England, the Mid Atlantic, and among Protestants of English descent. This new political rivalry would define American politics for decades. Although the Second National Bank had been rechartered in 1816 and had helped stabilize the economy, Jackson saw it as a dangerous institution, one that served the wealthy elite and foreign investors, not everyday Americans. In 1832, Henry Clay, running against Jackson for president, teamed up with bank president Nicholas Biddle to force Jackson's hand. They pushed Congress to recharter the bank early. Congress passed the bill, but Jackson vetoed it. He denounced the bank as a tool of the rich, declaring, "The bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it." Jackson then fired Treasury secretaries who refused to follow his orders and appointed Roger B. Taney, who began moving federal funds into 80 state pet banks. Many of these banks were corrupt, and Taney himself had personal investments in them. Within 3 months, over half of the $10 million in federal funds had been pulled from the national bank, effectively crippling it. This aggressive, personal leadership style would define Jackson's presidency. Another major test of Jackson's presidency came with the Nullification Crisis. In 1828, Congress passed a 38% tariff on certain imports, a move that hurt the Southern economy. Southerners paid more for European goods, and many began to see these tariffs as an indirect attack on slavery. In 1832, Jackson signed a tariff that offered only a modest reduction, angering the South further. South Carolina, led by Jackson's own Vice President, John C. Calhoun, reacted by passing an ordinance of nullification, declaring the tariffs void and threatening to raise an army. Jackson responded with a firm proclamation: disunion by armed force is treason. Are you ready to incur its guilt? He persuaded Congress to pass the force bill, authorizing military action if needed. Calhoun resigned in protest and worked behind the scenes to broker a compromise. A new, lower tariff was introduced, and South Carolina eventually backed down. Jackson had preserved the Union, but just barely. Perhaps Jackson's most infamous policy was his treatment of Native Americans. In the Old Southwest, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, the five civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, had long occupied valuable land. The Cherokee, in particular, had adopted many American customs: farming, cotton cultivation, and even slavery. In 1828, Georgia passed a law asserting control over Cherokee land. Jackson pushed for the Indian Removal Act of 1830, framing it as protection for Native Americans, though it was anything but. They were forced to either leave voluntarily or submit to state laws. In Worcester v. Georgia in 1832, the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government had exclusive authority over Native affairs, but Jackson ignored the decision, allegedly saying, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let's see him enforce it." Under his successor, Martin Van Buren, federal troops forcibly removed 18,000 Cherokees from their land in the winter of 1838 into 1839. The march to present-day Oklahoma became known as the Trail of Tears, where 1 out of every 4 died. This remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. The election of Andrew Jackson in 1828 marked a turning point in American politics. Jackson wasn't a polished statesman. He was a war hero, a populist, and a man of the people. His presidency expanded democracy for white men, challenged elite power, transformed the presidency into a forceful central figure, redefined party politics, and left behind a complicated legacy of populism, patriotism, and deep injustice. To his supporters, Jackson was the embodiment of the American ideal: patriotic, plain spoken, and fiercely independent. To his critics, he was a tyrant, trampling the Constitution, native rights, and checks and balances in pursuit of his vision. Andrew Jackson left behind a transformed political system, one that would shape the country for generations to come. His presidency was messy, bold, and deeply controversial. Whether you see him as a champion of democracy or a destroyer of justice, one thing is clear: Jackson changed the course of American history. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.